just before I take the first question, I want to thank those traditional people whose land we gathered on today, the West Saanich people, for allowing me to be a guest in their territory. Thank you. Especially if there's any West Saanich community members here today. Thank you.
What was your motivation for this career?
Oh, what was the motivation for this career? Well, how many of you are 11 years of age in this room? Lift your hand. Older than that. All of you almost. Fantastic. Well, I started to drink alcohol when I was 11 because of all the chaos in my home. And I drank very heavily for 11 years. I didn't graduate from high school. I had to go back and get my grade 12 in order to go to psychiatric nursing school. And once I sobered up and I had a healthy life, I realized I was obligated and I wanted to give back. And so that's how, after almost 25 years of serving our communities, that's where I am today. But I started working in the hospital and in an elder care home and with young people. Thank you.
How do you help people heal their past?
How do I help people hear their past? Well, one of the first things is to use these two things. Right? The world would be a very different place if we used these instead of this, even twice as much. So I'm really glad, no offense, young man, but it has been you as young men who have started all the questions. So I'm very grateful that you as young women are using your voice. Because sometimes the young women sit at the back and you don't get seen and you don't get heard. So thank you for asking the questions. So that is one way. We can make a difference by listening, and that's what I do in my work, mostly is listen. And my grandma taught me when you enter a room, because she said lots of people get hurt in childhood. So when you enter a room, fill it with love. So that when people come in, they feel that. People can feel when they're sitting with us when they're being heard. And when they're being heard, they talk more, and they talk more, and they talk more. So in some ways, it's simply being there as a witness to them telling their story. Sometimes the stories I hear, I think to myself, how are you even alive? How are you even alive? So thank you, and it's a privilege to hear those stories.
And how did you find your way back from life's challenges?
Oh, how did I find my way back from life's challenges? Well, when there was the talk about competition, when I was growing up in my home, we always watched sports, and Wayne Gretzky was huge, right? So that tells you how old I am. And when I had just finished nursing school, I had the privilege to take my mom to a Canucks game. And it was when he played for the Los Angeles Kings. And halfway through the third period, I passed out in my chair drunk. And she grabbed me by the ear and yanked me out of it. At that time, it was the Pacific Coliseum. And she gave me quite a talking to. And that's when it changed for me. Because what happened was, in that last period, he got a natural hat trick. And so because of my drinking, my mom did not get to see the natural hat trick. So what happens at some point, we realize that our actions impact others significantly. And that impact can be positive or not so positive. We get to choose on what that impact is. So thank you. So it was my mom. Yes, thank you for waiting.
What have you taken from your experiences?
What have I taken from my experiences? One, that we as Indigenous or First Peoples in this country are incredibly resilient. That we've had to be that ball over almost 500 years and bounce back and bounce back. And we see today, Ivan Lemore, all sorts of things about our people standing up and being seen. And I think that's the greatest thing I've taken from my experience, is watching our people move to a time where we're more willing to be seen in the world again.
What experiences do you have working and speaking internationally?
I was sharing with Christopher earlier, I came back in January from a country called Aotearoa. Does anybody know what it's called in English? Aotearoa. It's New Zealand. And one of the greatest things I learned there was just what you were asked this morning. How do you welcome somebody? And you said with respect and with honor. When I was in that country and the countries of Vanuatu and the Solomons and Australia and the United States, that is always how I'm treated. And it makes me very, very excited to see that, but also I feel incredibly humbled in having those privileges of experiences.
How would you help someone who learns all the work already?
How would you help someone be more resilient? Well, we all have it within us. It's sometimes life challenges us to really act on it and be that ball that bounces back. One of the ways is to help that person, one, by listening, two, by creating a sense of family for them. So sometimes our natural families, there's things going on there where it's not safe to talk. So we have to have another sense of family. Our community is also very, very important in fostering our resiliency. And I think not just as Indigenous people, but for all of us, having a sense to what our culture is, what is our ancestral language, and our connection to the land, the water, and the stars. Which means get outside as much as you can. Be outside as much as you can. When my children come home from school, they're allowed in for a snack, and then they're outside till dinner. And after dinner, where do you think they go if they don't have homework? Outside. Because we need to be outside more. We've become a society that sits like this, looking at something square. I'm sorry? What is the shift? Thank you. I really believe it's about, there's a change in our society in this country about beginning to honor Indigenous history and Indigenous peoples, but also the shift is about us as Indigenous people standing up, shining again, sharing our stories, sharing our teachings, and making change. If you think about, my children are in school District 61, and the last 2 years have had higher graduation rates of our children than ever in history. That's part of the shift. We have more Indigenous students at the University of British Columbia in medicine to become doctors than ever in history. That's part of the shift. Lots of places where the shift is happening. Yes, please. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. You got a question there? No, just look somewhere else, don't talk to you anymore.
Whereabouts did you grow up?
Oh, where did I grow up? Well, this is part of why I started to drink, because my family we moved almost 20 times before I entered grade 5. And when I entered grade 5, it was in Nelson, and in my class there was 3 students. So in my school, there was grade 3, 4, 5, and 6 in one room. And as a result of moving so much, I didn't have roots. So when life came along and blew me, I didn't have roots like a sapling that would help me kind of flow with that. Instead, I got blown around, and I got kind of taken where not so positive things were occurring. So I grew up all over, but I call Kamloops home. Although we've lived here now for 18 years on the Kwangmin territory. Anyone else?
Do you have any regrets in your career?
Oh, do I have any regrets in my career? I had an opportunity to apply for medical school, and I didn't have the courage. So that potentially would be one regret. That would be the one that would stand out. What are the benefits of being resilient? Well, it opens doors. We can be a healthy role model for others. It also allows us, it's like when we take a step forward in our resiliency, it's almost like we say to the universe, give me more. Not necessarily more hard things, but let me have more experiences in life. More experiences.
We've got time for about 2 more questions. Have we got them? Otherwise, there we are.
How do I spend my free time? Yoga, with my family. And one of the things I love to do that fosters creativity for me is to go to the movie and just kind of get lost for 2 hours. Actually, I haven't heard from you yet.
What are you going to do to help others?
What am I planning to do to help others? Well, I just released a book that's, well, actually was just launched, not jokingly, Sunday in Toronto. So I've just come back from Toronto. So in that book, it is, my hope is that it's a mirror for people to see their own resilience and their own strength. And it tells our history as Indigenous people through story. And the second story is beginning to come. And it is about a lot of humor and the stories and teachings that elders tell, so that we can learn from those, so that when we get tested and our resiliency gets tested, we can remember those stories and teachings of other people.
What's your book called?
The one that's just come out, it's called Tilly, A Story of Hope and Resilience.
Well, we've got a few
Okay.
more, so we're rolling. Yeah.
Working with people healing their past, have you ever heard someone's story that just really touched you?
Yes, quite a few. and there's one that really comes to mind, but sometimes when we hear people's stories, they're so traumatic that to share them again can also be painful for other people to hear. So the one that most definitely comes to mind is not really appropriate to share here. Hear it in a minute.
What caused your family to move so much?
Oh, what caused my family to move so much? My dad was an adventurer, and he would find a job for a short period of time, and then he'd get bored, and then he'd look for another job. Then he'd find another job, and then he'd find another job, until my mom finally said, "We're not moving anymore," and he continued to move. So he left us when I was 15. So that's what caused my family to move so much. What other career would I choose? Well, I would love to be a doctor, so that's part of why that's a regret for me. And the other one would be a pilot. So thank you. And thank you again for the privilege of sitting with you today.